There are things you do with all your love, but he doesn't interpret them as love. The worst part is, he doesn't even do it consciously. One day, he just starts to disconnect, to give you less, to stop valuing you in the same way. And you're left wondering, at what point did everything change when all I wanted was to make him feel loved? And it's not your fault. No one ever taught you that some gestures, which seem like affection, can be perceived in his subconscious as weakness. This video isn't here to criticize you. It's here to open your eyes. Because often, what pushes a man away the most is exactly what you were doing to keep him close. And if you've ever felt that the more love you gave, the less you received in return, then what you're about to discover today will transform you from the inside out. Because it's not about stopping loving. It's about stopping giving in a way that destroys your value while you love. So hit that like button right now and subscribe. It's completely free for you, and it supports me immensely. Ready? Let's go. Blind spot 1. Becoming his constant emotional comfort when your presence heals but stops being desired. There's an invisible line that many cross without realizing it. The line that separates comfort from desire. That's where everything starts to fall out of balance. Because there's a difference between being the place where someone finds peace and being the place they only come to when they want to escape themselves. Maybe you've never thought about it this way, but listen closely. When you become his automatic refuge, his immediate relief, his unconditional haven, you might, little by little, erase the mystery that made you desirable. No, you're not doing anything wrong from an emotional perspective. You're just forgetting this. Desire doesn't feed on relief. It feeds on contrast. Your soul has the capacity to support, to listen, to embrace even what others don't dare touch. But when you give everything without a filter, without pause, without space, that generosity starts to be perceived as something available, guaranteed, always there. And what's always there stops being seen. Let me explain with a story that's different from the usual. Claudia, 36 years old, was in a relationship with an emotionally complex man. He was brilliant, intense, with a difficult past. He had moments of silence, periods of low energy, days when he emotionally disappeared. And every time that happened, she noticed. Without him asking, she would reach out, write to him, calm him, tell him she was there, that she understood his processes, that she wouldn't leave him alone. She did this because she loved him, of course, but also because deep down, she held an unspoken belief. If I don't support him, he'll fall apart. And if he falls apart, what we're building will fall apart too. Months passed like this. She continued to be his safe haven, while he became more and more absent. Not out of malice, not out of coldness, but because when someone cushions all your falls, you stop feeling the impact. And without impact, there's no reflection, no effort, no drive to reconquer. One day, after weeks of feeling emotionally drained, Claudia asked him, "Does what we have still move you?" And he, without cruelty but with honesty, replied, "I feel peace with you, but I don't know if I desire you like I used to." That's when it hit her. She realized that, without meaning to, she had turned her love into anesthesia. She had protected him so much that he no longer felt anything. And worse, she had stopped feeling anything for herself. Because when you become only a comfort for someone else, you forget that you too deserve to be sought after, desired, surprised. So what's the point? It's not about stopping being compassionate. It's not about becoming cold or distant. It's about learning to recognize when your support starts to suffocate desire. When your constant presence becomes invisible. When your presence is taken for granted because there's no longer absence. And here's the most revealing part. If you don't learn to dose, to seek your own presence, to support without absorbing, to care without erasing yourself, then your power fades. And when your power fades, you can keep loving, yes, but the other person stops admiring you. And when unconscious respect fades, the bond turns into an emotional routine, a calm without magnetism, a companionship without fire. And we're not here for that. You weren't created to be anyone's emotional therapist or the vibrational mother of a man who doesn't yet know how to stand on his own. You were created to share your light, not to replace his, to be a refuge but also a mystery, to be a support, but without erasing your own boundaries. And what comes next is even more powerful, because in the next point, as always without you expecting it, you'll discover how the peace you generate, if you embody it with conscious presence, can reawaken something he had lost, the deep desire to have to win you back. Get ready, because this, you've never heard before. Blind spot 2. Avoiding conflict at all costs when your peace becomes submission to his psyche. And then, when you stop saving him from himself, something even more subtle happens. Your presence starts to take on a different shape. You're no longer just his constant emotional comfort. Now you're molding yourself to avoid disturbing him. And that, while it may seem noble, is one of the most elegant ways to betray yourself without realizing it. Yes, you're doing it out of love, out of empathy, out of that part of you that only wants peace. But here's the raw truth no one tells you. When you avoid conflict to preserve the bond, what you're doing is sacrificing your power to maintain the illusion of a harmony that isn't even real. And what's even more unsettling is that many men sense this. They won't tell you, they won't verbalize it, but they'll perceive it in the most primal part of their psyche. Because a bond where everything is acquiescence, where nothing is confronted, where there's no tension or boundary, is a bond that awakens neither the inner child nor the adult man. It only awakens the dormant ego. Let me tell you a story that explains this without beating around the bush. Nomi, 39, a floral therapist, had developed a deep level of emotional awareness. When she met Ernesto, an impulsive, charismatic, and somewhat erratic man, she thought her presence could balance him. And at first, it did. He was fascinated by her serenity, her ability to speak softly even when he got worked up, her way of saying everything was okay, even when it wasn't. But over time, what was once admiration turned into a power dynamic. Ernesto started pushing boundaries, not aggressively, but emotionally. He'd show up late, and she'd wait without a word. He'd promise plans and then change them without guilt. He'd throw out hurtful comments disguised as jokes, and she'd smile to avoid escalating the conflict. And every time something in her wanted to say, "This doesn't feel right," an inner voice would rise. "Don't make a fuss, Nomi. He's just like that. Don't be that demanding woman who complains about everything." Until one day, as he was distractedly talking on the phone during a dinner she had carefully prepared, something inside her broke. Not because of what he did, but because of what she had stopped doing for herself. She had become so quiet, so peaceful, so understanding, that there was no longer a woman in her capable of sparking a fire. And the thing is, when you choose not to confront, not to set boundaries, not to show your discomfort in the hope of preserving peace, what you're doing is training him to stop taking you seriously. Because a man doesn't respect someone who lets everything slide. He doesn't commit to someone who never says enough. And he doesn't deeply value someone who doesn't value themselves in uncomfortable moments. You can be the peace in his chaos, but if your peace serves his comfort and not your integrity, that peace is no longer a virtue. It's submission, and the masculine soul, even if it doesn't say it, loses its emotional and psychic attraction to a woman who doesn't challenge him, even out of love. Do you see the blind spot here? It's not that he pulls away because you're too kind. It's that, in your effort not to lose him, you're losing yourself. And he feels it. Even if he can't explain it, he feels it. And what he feels is that he no longer needs to make an effort to keep you, because you've already shown you're willing to silence your discomfort to avoid disturbing him. And that's where the detachment begins, because no one clings to what's already conquered. And when everything you give comes without friction, without resistance, without reclamation, it loses the pulse that makes something truly desirable. So, what's the way out? Return to your center and, from that center, dare to disturb. Not with violence, not with drama, but with truth. Tell him what doesn't sit right with you. Set boundaries without fearing he'll get upset. Assert your perspective without over-justifying. Because there, in the woman who knows how to love but also how to say no, a kind of attraction is born that transcends the physical and emotional. That's when he starts to see you differently. Not as the figure who soothes everything, but as the presence that challenges him to be better. And listen to this. Deep respect isn't earned through constant tenderness. It's earned through boundaries that vibrate with self-love. When you stop avoiding conflict just to keep him, you start building the only kind of bond that lasts. One where he knows that to be with you, it's not enough to just stay. He has to earn it. And there, not only does he value you, but he chooses you consciously. What follows is even more disruptive, because we're going to talk about the exact moment when, without even realizing it, you start justifying his mistakes with your empathy and, unknowingly, begin to absolve him of emotional responsibility. What's coming will open your eyes like never before. Blind spot 3, justifying his mistakes with your empathy. And suddenly, without you noticing, love starts to deceive you. Not because it's false, not because you're wrong to feel it, but because your noble heart, the one that sees everything with compassion, starts telling you a story that sounds beautiful, but pulls you away from yourself. A story that says, "He didn't mean to hurt me. He's wounded. He's going through a tough time. He's probably afraid to love. I need to be more patient. He's not doing it out of malice." And of course, there's nothing more sacred than loving with empathy. But when your empathy is used to excuse what breaks you, it's no longer a virtue, it's emotional abandonment. What feels like understanding becomes a silent permission for him to keep being less than what you deserve. And the most dangerous part is that it doesn't happen in a single day. It happens in small doses. A promise he doesn't keep, and you tell yourself he forgot. A message left unanswered, and you tell yourself he's busy. A lack of emotional presence, and you justify it by saying he must be dealing with something internal. And do you know what's the hardest part? The more you understand him, the less he makes an effort to understand you. Let me tell you a story that illustrates this with brutal precision. Angelina, 43, divorced, mother of a teenager, met Miguel at a conscious leadership conference. He was intense, magnetic, and seemed deeply connected to his personal process. At first, it was a revelation. Angelina felt seen, heard, admired. But soon, the signs began. Miguel would disappear without warning, have emotional outbursts without explanation, and when faced with any attempt to go deeper, he'd change the subject or vanish. And Angelina, with her compassionate soul, started rationalizing everything. He must have unresolved trauma. He's probably afraid to fully open up. Maybe I remind him of his ex. She convinced herself she needed to be different, more understanding, less demanding. And so, slowly, she turned her love into a constant justification of what was, in reality, hurting her. Every time he messed up, she found an explanation. Every time he pulled away, she wove a tender narrative to avoid feeling rejected. Every time he crossed a boundary, she softened it with emotional psychology. But what she didn't see was that with every justification, she was teaching him he could fail her without losing her. And that, in the masculine subconscious, registers as an unspoken rule. I can keep doing this. She won't leave. And that's where the imbalance begins, where you love, and he simply allows himself to be, without growing, without awakening, without taking responsibility, because he doesn't have to, because without meaning to. You're doing his inner work for him, and listen to me with an open heart. There's nothing more devastating to the feminine soul than continuing to offer understanding to someone who's no longer taking accountability. And not because he's bad, but because you've taken a place that isn't yours. The place of his emotional therapist, his inner analyst, his silent justifier. And that drains you, disconnects you, makes you invisible to his consciousness because you're helping him avoid looking at himself. Carl Jung said it with soul-piercing clarity. No one is enlightened by fantasizing about figures of light, but by making their darkness conscious. And if you're absorbing, explaining, and masking that darkness, he'll never face it, and therefore, he'll never grow. True love isn't the kind that understands everything. It's the kind that, even while understanding, sets a boundary. It's the kind that says, I understand you, but I won't allow this. It's the kind that affirms, I know you're on a journey, but my soul deserves presence too. So how do you return to your center? Start by stopping analyzing him and start listening to yourself. When something bothers you, don't theorize about it. Pay attention to it. When something feels wrong, don't try to understand it. Decide whether you accept it or not. Because your soul doesn't need another explanation. It needs action. It needs coherence. It needs you to put it first. And when you do that, when he starts to feel that your understanding is no longer guaranteed, when his chaos no longer has your automatic shelter, then and only then will he feel he could lose something valuable if he doesn't transform. And that's when everything changes, not because you force him, but because finally he's compelled to be the man you deserve. And if he doesn't, then you won't be there to play the role of his emotional anesthetic. Listen to me. You're not his balm, you're not his therapist, you're not his emotional bridge. You're a complete, conscious, powerful woman, and you deserve to be chosen by someone willing to grow with you, not at your expense. What follows exposes the quietest but most destructive moment of all. When you start loving more while he gives less, and you think that's unconditional love when, in reality, it's self-abandonment. Blind spot 4. Loving more when he gives less. And this is where many don't see it coming, because it doesn't always start with an obvious blow. Sometimes it begins with small silences you fill, small voids you cover, gestures that are missing, and you multiply to compensate. Yes, you, the woman who loves deeply, the one who doesn't measure what she gives because her love is genuine, the one who believes that if she puts more love on the table, he'll finally understand the value of what's in front of him. But what you don't know is that this silent strategy of giving more when he gives less doesn't bring him closer. It pushes him away. Because the human subconscious, as cruel as it may sound, doesn't value what comes without effort. And you, without realizing it, are in that position. You're teaching him he can be emotionally stingy and still have everything with you. Let me explain what's really happening. When you start noticing his distance, that subtle disconnection, that I need to focus on myself, that I'm caught up in other things, you don't confront him, you understand him. And in understanding him, you don't pull back, you wait for him. And while waiting, you don't stop. You love him even more. The result? He feels he can give less, and you'll make up the difference. He lowers the emotional volume, and you turn it up. He walks slowly, and you run to keep up with him. And that's where everything breaks. Because you're not being loved, you're being useful. And utility, as painful as it is to hear, doesn't ignite love. It maintains a functional presence, never an emotional one. Do you see it? True love doesn't thrive on overcompensation. It fades in it. And I'm not saying this to judge. I'm saying it as a truth I've seen repeated time and again in extraordinary, wise, sensitive, intuitive women who, when they sense something cooling, don't retreat to listen to their intuition. They dive in to give more, to save, to prove what they feel is real. And yes, what they feel is real. But the way they express it is dismantling the magnetism. Let me tell you a story that illustrates this with brutal clarity. Betsy, 39, a social worker, was dating a man with whom she seemed to have a genuine connection. For the first few months, everything flowed. Daily messages, deep dates, attention, presence, shared plans. But then, without apparent reason, he started showing signs. Less contact, less interest, vague excuses. Betsy felt it. Her body knew it. But instead of pausing, she did what many do. She sent more messages. She suggested more meetups. She wrote letters baring her soul. She prepared thoughtful gestures. She showed she was willing to fight for the bond. And what happened? He left. Not with a bang, not with a fight. He simply faded away, as if he'd never been there. And when Betsy told me about it, crying, she said, "I don't understand. I loved him even when he was no longer there." And that was the problem. When he started pulling back, she started multiplying. And what she didn't see was that this imbalance wasn't just unfair, it was humiliating to her soul. Because there's nothing crueler than loving alone while the other person is still there. Physically present, but not emotionally. And you, trying to fill the void with more love, when the only thing he needed was to take responsibility for his part. But because you didn't give him that chance, because you covered it for him, he never had to truly choose you. He never had to make an effort. He never felt he could lose something valuable if he didn't commit. And you lost yourself in trying not to lose him. Listen to this with your soul. Loving more when you're given less isn't an act of courage. It's an act of fear. And fear doesn't build healthy relationships. It builds asymmetrical ones, where one person empties themselves and the other gets used to it. So, the next time you feel that urge to prove more, to give more, to do something more, ask yourself, why do I have to try so hard for someone who isn't trying for me? Self-love, when truly embodied, doesn't seek to compensate. It expects reciprocity, and if it doesn't find it, it withdraws quietly, with dignity. Because when you stop overcompensating, he's forced to wonder, what did I do to make her, who gave everything, now be at peace without me? And if he has a shred of awareness, that question will pierce him more than 1,000 reproaches. What follows dives into the deepest part of self-abandonment disguised as unconditional love, when you start giving up on yourself in the name of that love. And you forget that someone who doesn't choose you with presence doesn't deserve your persistence. Get ready, because what you're about to hear will not only hurt, it will set you free. Blind spot 5. Stopping choosing yourself. Sometimes you don't notice it. Sometimes it happens so gradually you don't realize it. But one day, you wake up, and you no longer know who you are in that relationship. You don't know what you like, what bothers you, what you need, what you desire. You only know what he needs, what bothers him, what he likes, what makes him happy. And when you reach that point, even if your mouth says, "I love you," your soul is screaming, "I'm not choosing myself anymore." This is the most invisible point, and that's why it's the most dangerous. Because it makes you believe that loving unconditionally means ignoring yourself unconditionally. And no, it's not the same thing. Carl Jung put it differently. Nothing influences the environment more than one's unresolved state. And what happens when you love from an unresolved state? When you love to fill voids, to avoid being alone, to have someone confirm you're enough, love stops being love. It's need disguised as giving. And the saddest part is you can go years without noticing, years believing you're giving the best of yourself, when, in reality, you're giving all of yourself without leaving anything for you. And the other person feels it. No matter how perfect your gestures, no matter how impeccable your support, he feels it. Because the human soul, and especially masculine energy, has a special radar for detecting a presence that no longer chooses itself. And when a man senses you're more committed to maintaining your presence, maintaining the bond, than to yourself, something in him shifts. Not because he's cruel, not because he doesn't value your love, but because he no longer sees you as an equal. He sees you as a figure willing to do anything except leave. And desire, respect, deep admiration can't grow there. Listen closely. When you stop choosing yourself, he stops choosing you too. And that's the breaking point. That moment when you no longer set boundaries, no longer make demands, no longer speak up, no longer propose, no longer question. You just love. You just understand. You just accompany. And he feels it, not as gratitude, but as power. Power over you, emotional power, psychological power. And that, as painful as it is, devalues you in his eyes. Because there's nothing more magnetic to the masculine soul than a woman who chooses herself. A woman who, even while loving with her whole heart, knows where her dignity begins and ends. I'll put it this way. A woman who no longer chooses herself becomes transparent to the other's soul. He may keep you close, but emotionally, he no longer sees you. And it's not his fault. It's yours, because you're the one who faded. One gesture at a time, one silence at a time, one concession at a time. And the irony is, you did it for love, but that misunderstood love pulled you away from yourself. And when you move away from yourself, you lose the only power that truly attracts, your presence. Let me tell you a story you won't forget. Lucia, 44, an interior designer, fell deeply in love with a man 10 years younger. At first it was all sparks, admiration, connection. But little by little she started giving in. First her time, then her space, then her decisions. And when he began showing immaturity, disappearing emotionally, not responding with the same depth, Lucia justified it. She told herself it was his age. She told herself it was his life stage. She told herself she could wait for him, accompany him, guide him. And so, without realizing it, she became a mother, a mentor, a refuge. But she stopped being a woman. Until one day he told her, I don't know why, but I don't desire you the same way anymore. And it was like a dagger, because she had given everything. She had emptied herself for love, and now she was no longer seen. But of course, how do you desire someone who doesn't desire themselves? Lucia had confused love with sacrifice, and that isn't rewarded with commitment. It's paid for with indifference. That's why I'm telling you this. Without sugarcoating, you're not here to erase yourself in the name of love. You're here to love out loud, to choose yourself without guilt, to be so fully yourself that the other has no choice but to see you. And if he sees you and doesn't choose you, then it's not a loss, it's protection. A woman who no longer chooses herself is destined to live relationships where she'll always be the functional option, never the unforgettable vibration. So always remember, the love you give has no value if in giving it, you stop giving to yourself. And to help you internalize this, I leave you with this affirmation, like a seal of returning to yourself. My love doesn't erase me, it affirms me. I choose myself, even when I love with all my heart. Stay now, because in the conclusion of this video, we're going to piece together all the hidden parts of this puzzle. And you'll understand why, when you change the way you love, you also change your emotional destiny forever. Conclusion: when love is born from fear, it loses its strength. And when it's given without awareness, it loses its magnetism. Today, you've opened your eyes to 5 common acts that seem like love, but in reality, dilute your power. Now you know. It's not what you give that makes you unforgettable. It's what you dare to stop giving when it erases your value. And that's where the real revolution begins. If this message touched something in you, write it in the comments with this powerful phrase. From today, my love will be a presence that chooses itself. Because that's where it all begins. Not when someone sees you, but when you stop hiding out of fear that they'll leave. And if this message resonated with you, I invite you to leave your like, subscribe, and activate the notification bell without fail. And if you feel in your heart the desire to support this space even more, you can now join the channel as a member and enjoy exclusive benefits, like priority responses to your comments and psychological questions, participating in decisions about upcoming videos, and receiving closer guidance in your transformation process. But don't leave yet. On the screen, I'm suggesting 2 videos that I'm sure you'll love. 2 pieces of wisdom with immense value. I'll be waiting for you in the one you choose. As always, I'm Christian, your favorite psychologist and philosopher. See you there.